Hello, everybody. My name's James, and for the benefit of those listening to the podcast, you're listening to Ask James, my regular YouTube live stream where I welcome questions from the YouTube community on anything football related. Obviously, there is no Premier League football this week. The FA Cup fourth round dominates matters, and of course, there will be several implications from those results that we'll discuss probably a little bit on this stream in terms of potential, depending on the questions. We'll obviously cover in a lot more detail next week. Chip Strategy podcast, as we've discussed previously, will be on Thursday once all of the FA Cup ties and the two Carabao Cup semi-finals second legs are concluded, just in case Southampton happens to cause a shock at St James's. We're certainly not expecting Nottingham Forest to come back from 3-0 down. Excuse me, but otherwise, there's nothing I particularly want to cover off from the start, so I'm going to get straight into the questions. Chris Wood says, "Hi James, who do you see scoring more points over the next stretch of fixtures, Harry Kane or Bruno Fernandes?" Well, what's the next stretch? How long are we considering that to? So if we're considering United got the double in 22, which obviously is dependent on the cup results tomorrow, and they blank in 25, assuming that that's what they do, and obviously that it's complicated. I'm not going to discuss it now. We'll know after tomorrow night. Tottenham could have an extra fixture against Chelsea in game week 25. So what's the stretch? If we're saying next two, I'm going to say Bruno Fernandes. If we're going to say next three, I'm going to say Bruno Fernandes. If we say next four, it's a little bit closer. You can say next five, I'm going to say Harry Kane. 6, Kane. 7, Kane. That would be my take at the moment. So it depends how long you're judging the stretch, I think, Chris. Daniel Cullerton says, "Can Liverpool salvage their season and finish in the top 4? If not, where do you think they will finish? Keep up the great content, mate." Thank you, Daniel. Of course they can. They absolutely can. Just unfortunately not really showing any signs that they're likely to do so at the moment. But we do know that if they sort themselves out, I think it's a mental fatigue problem a little bit, and there's obviously some injuries to the squad at the moment, and there's some players, particularly in the midfield area, who have regressed. But if they can sort that out and fix the midfield problem, then quite quickly they can go on a run of winning matches. I don't think anybody doubts that very quickly Liverpool could go and win 5-6 games in a row. And if they do that, they'll put themselves in contention for top 4. It's not like they're chasing down a Man City for first here. They're chasing down 4th. You put 5-6 wins back to back together, suddenly you're going to be right in contention. So I wouldn't rule them out. My current take is they probably won't finish top 4. So not showing signs of it. And obviously Newcastle particularly is showing great consistency defensively. Yeah, I wouldn't rule them out. In terms of where they'll finish, my best guess right now would probably be 5th or 6th, probably. Sagnik says, "Hi Jimbo, don't watch the Portuguese league, so it would be interesting to know from you about Pedro Porro and what he will bring to the current Spurs team. Also, if you can buy a centre-back in January, who would it be?" So you're probably going to guess Sagnik, but I also don't watch Portuguese football either. So my knowledge of Pedro Porro is limited to the 2 games that Tottenham had. I can't say he overly stood out, but then I also wasn't keeping an eye out for him, respectively. Should the signing go through, I will probably review at least one of those games and have a closer look at it, probably for our patrons on Talking Tactics. If you look at him on YouTube, look at highlight reels, he looks like he's going to be the best right back in the world. It also looked that way when we brought Emerson Royal. So I'm loath to look at these things. I think clearly, technically, he's a good player. Can take set pieces, penalties even for Sporting Lisbon, free kicks. So there's definitely a technical player there. I know there's question marks about him defensively. You won't find much of that in a YouTube compilation video. So you need to study him. But clearly it's a position of weakness for Tottenham. And if he's a player that Conte wants and the club wants, then I imagine he'll very quickly become first choice and put pressure on. To be honest, Emerson Royal, after the last 2, has probably leapt back in front of Matt Doherty, I think. But if Porro is a player that Conte wants, he'll go into that team quite quickly, I think. Although not necessarily against Manchester City in game week 22. In terms of buying a centre-back, I think the ideal ones for Tottenham would be just go Vardiol or Alessandro Bastoni would be the 2 that would probably cost an earth. Vardiol especially probably very much out of Tottenham's reach unless they decide to do something dramatic, which I can't foresee. So I don't know if those ones are realistic. I know there's reports today that a Premier League club has potentially outbid Paris Saint-Germain for Milan's Skriniar, the fact that that club's not been named suggests that it's probably someone working in collaboration with Inter to probably get Paris Saint-Germain to pay a little bit more money rather than serious interest, I'd suggest. Sounds like the player wants to go to PSG. But I'd be very interested in Skriniar a couple of years ago, so if there was a deal to be done there, I'd be interested. Although I believe him and Conte didn't necessarily have the best relationship at Inter, so that's something I'd heard somewhere. So those players would certainly be of interest. Looking within the actual Premier League at the moment, it's a difficult one, right? Because what you need right now is you need Conte and the football club to be on the same page, because I think we all know there's a good chance that Conte won't be manager next year. So if you're buying a player specifically for Conte's system, what's the point? One of the things I've questioned about Porro is, look, can he play right back? Because there's every chance that the new manager that comes in will play a back four. Can he play right back? Maybe he's only a right winger. Okay, what's the point then? That would be my take, for example. But it sounds like more right back than right winger, to be honest. So I think that's okay. And offensive fullbacks can certainly make you a dangerous team, as we've seen, particularly obviously from Liverpool over the last number of years. So it'd have to be someone that aligned with Conte, and I just don't think Tottenham are going to spend big on it at the moment. The rumours are that if the Porro deal happens, Tottenham will look at trying to get a player in, potentially a centre-back, and potentially a creative player. But those players will specifically be players who are out of contract in the summer, so can be bought fairly cheaply, or players on loan, like they've just done with Arnaut Danjuma, with the possibility to buy them should the deal be successful, and should Conte stay, or should a new manager also want that player. So look, I really don't think Tottenham should be spending stupid amounts of money at the moment. But if Conte and Tottenham both believe Porro is a good potential long-term prospect, then that's easier to look at and buy than say perhaps, we need a specific left-sided centre-back. Yeah, but you need a specific left-sided centre-back for a back three or a back four. I don't think Tottenham are going to go mad for it at the moment. Chris Wood says also, what to do with Cancelo? He stones the answer, or is Lewis worth a punt? Already have Bueno and Patterson. So, look, if Lewis is going to play regularly, 3.9, who am I to argue with at that value, right? Any returns is essentially great value at a price that's cheaper than the original lowest starting price for a defender. My concern with going with Lewis is twofold. One, subject to obviously what you've got in the bank, he may be a difficult player to move on, particularly when you've already got Bueno as well, makes that more difficult. And of course, if you decipher that suddenly you need a different Man City player, say Foden suddenly gets back in the team and hits a streak, for example, what are you going to do? That's why I don't particularly like that move. John Stones is probably the one I'd favour currently, if it's got to be a direct City replacement. How much are we going to learn from the game tonight against Arsenal in the Cup? Probably not a lot, to be totally honest. And it's certainly a move I've got to make next week. So I don't own Luke Shaw, so that's probably the most likely for me currently, with the idea being he or Botman would then move on for me in game week 25 should those two teams blank. It'd probably more likely be Botman, to be honest, at that stage, as Newcastle go to Manchester City the week after. But then I may need Botman as cover for 28, so that's not set in stone. But it'd probably be Shaw for me, I should think. Tyrone Mings of Villa is a consideration, because I think he's going to cover up 25 and 28 quite nicely if he stays in the team. I'm aware that Diego Carlos is getting fitter. I had a conversation with Lee Jackson, our Villa correspondent, on Zoom earlier today, and he said Unai Emery was hoping to be back available before the end of February, so that'll put a bit of pressure on, and there's no guarantee that it'll be Konsa or Mings stays in the team. And obviously, game week 25 is the last weekend of February. So probably want to leave that decision a little bit later. If you've already got the likes of Luke Shaw, I completely understand you're going to want to look at a City player. For me, Chris, it would be John Stones rather than Rico Lewis currently. Also, he's probably less likely to come on in a game. Lewis could come on. I've almost more likely. Owen Wilson says, thought you were overly harsh on Spurs' performance versus Fulham. Poor first half, but second half was controlled and well managed. Impressive away win, given how good Fulham have been this year. Well, I've reviewed the game again. Remember, it's the emotional context for me. For me, it's almost more difficult to analyse Tottenham in the heat at the moment than it is obviously for other teams, because I'm I'm looking at a game through an emotional set of eyes, if you will. But I've looked at the game in more detail from a possession-based perspective from Tottenham, and for talking tactics, we're going to release for our advanced tier patrons not long after this stream, actually. And we absolutely did control the second half. I also think Fulham were piss poor about it in the second half. I think they run out of legs. That it's certainly better for Tottenham with Rodrigo Bentancur in the team, which I highlight quite a bit in that team, in that video, sorry. And as long as Bentancur, Kulusevski and Kane stay fit, I think there's every chance that Tottenham's results will improve quite a lot in recent weeks. Fulham started really well in the first half hour, really good pressing off the ball. They were the better side. Then Tottenham got a foothold and scored, and that knocked their confidence a little bit. And yes, the control in the second half was much better, particularly for a team that has obviously really struggled recently in terms of defensive performances and goals conceded. So, yeah, we were never in any danger during that second half. One comment you will have heard me make is that I felt if I'd have been watching two other teams, I'd have gone, this is definitely finishing 1-0. And the only reason I wasn't comfortable with that at the time is because obviously it's my own team involved. So, yeah, it's not vintage. I expect my Tottenham to be much better than that on the ball, but there's signs that it might be progressing, and obviously they are short of confidence at the moment, and good results like this will start bringing it back. So, you know me, I'm always liable to be a little bit more critical on my own, I think. Daniel Cullerton says, last question from me, random one. What were your thoughts on Christian Ziege as a player? That is a random one. I think he was a great player, but not a great player for Tottenham. Tottenham got him towards the end of his career where defensively he really struggled. Beautiful wand of a left foot. I mean, in terms of his actual dead ball striking and crossing ability and even his shooting, very, very good. Tottenham unfortunately got the latter part of him. Also wasn't helped that Glenn Hoddle brought Ziege in and he wanted to play Ziege and Stephen Carr as wing-backs and play a back three. And I think I'm right in saying they maybe only played together once, which is a crazy statistic. Stephen Carr obviously had terrible injuries, so it meant that often he was playing left back in a back four a bit more than perhaps Hoddle would have liked and stuff. Good technician, but really struggled off the ball in terms of work ethic later in his career. I wouldn't say he didn't try or anything, just struggled because he was aging basically. But at his peak, very, very good player. Owen Wilson says, find it interesting that two of Spurs' last three managerial appointments were seen at the time as real statements that Spurs were aiming higher, but now are looked at pretty negatively. Is it testament to the fact that the dominant sides in European football are the ones who invest in projects rather than proven winners? Seems to be the model with the super successful clubs. Well, that defends. I think if we look at that from an English club perspective, and we look at what Ferguson built at United, what Wenger built at Arsenal, Guardiola and Klopp have obviously been in charge for a long time. The patience Arsenal have shown with Mikel Arteta, even Tottenham, although it didn't end with trophies, the progression under Maurizio Pochettino, a longer term vision. Then I think, yeah, it's obviously absolutely right to say that. However, you look at models like Chelsea. Chelsea have been very successful and constantly changed. And I think in terms of, you do reference European football, Bayern, Barca, Real Madrid regularly change coaches. So I don't know if we can say that if we bring the European clubs into consideration, because they do regularly change and obviously maintain, particularly in Real Madrid's case. You're not managing Real Madrid really for more than 2 years. Zidane is a very, very rare case of that. So they change regularly and obviously maintain success. Frederick Hertz says, pleased with my triple United and being on the right side of Nketiah, Watkins and Fernandez's form. Who would you swap for who out of De Bruyne, Martinelli and Almiron? 2 free transfers. I don't know. Well, you say you're on the right side of the triple United. You know what your triple United is, because the first thought is to say, well, okay, United players. But obviously I'm going to guess you got triple, so I can't say that. I probably wouldn't dive into Leeds players, so I wouldn't get rid of De Bruyne at the moment. Certainly not until we've gone past the weekend. I think information is quite important in terms of possibility even for Salah double in 26, which will look less likely should they win. Less likely should they lose on Sunday against Brighton in the Cup, but would still be possible. I'm very conscious of leaving the money from De Bruyne to Salah. You've got Martinelli, you've got... so I presume you want another Arsenal player. I'm going to guess you've got 2 Arsenal players, Nketiah and Martinelli. Maybe you've got a defensive, therefore I can't say to you all Almiron to Odegaard. I wouldn't be desperate to move Martinelli to Odegaard. I think if you can afford that sort of switch, then that's particularly interesting. Can you get up from Almiron to Amares by using another transfer to enable that, for example, to help get ready for game week 23? There's lots to consider. I certainly wouldn't think about it too much till after we've got at least past this weekend. At the value you're at, I'd arguably be more... If you're happy with what you've got, I'd probably be more inclined to say roll a transfer. Is the honest answer out of that. Ben Martin says, if you've obviously got 2, then why not take a punt on something, whether it's Nonto up front, like I said, and then move the money afterwards. Perhaps if you went Nonto up front, punted him for the double, maybe that allows you, like what I said, Almiron to Mahrez the week after, for example. Ben Martin says, how much rotation do you think we'll see in the Man City v Arsenal match today? I think if I'm Arteta, I'm tempted to play the full B team and just tell them to go for it. No, I think you'll get somewhere in the middle with Arsenal. I'd say probably four or so changes roughly. City could be anything. Got to consider as well that, but it's, obviously Arsenal don't play again till 8 days, and Man City don't play again for 9 days. So if the players are in good condition and you're trying to build momentum for the end of the season, to be honest with you, I don't think changing the whole team, I don't think is right for Arsenal. And I know there's a lot of Arsenal fans who are probably not that bothered about tonight, concentrate on the league and stuff, and I fully understand that. But imagine the confidence boost if you pick a fairly strong team and actually go down and win. It just increases the confidence even more. Then you'll be favourites to win the cup, and then suddenly you're looking at a potential double. So, and that's a league and cup double, not a double game week. So I don't think Arsenal will be changing the whole team. I've seen a list of the players that have travelled, so it looks like it probably will be a little bit of a mix and match. We can maybe expect people like Tomiyasu to start, maybe a Rob Holding, maybe a change of one of the midfielders, maybe Trossard starts, but I don't think there'll be too many changes. City, God knows, mate. No idea. But I imagine it will be some version of something that will look quite strong. Jahan Ahmed says, hello James, what's your thoughts on Gordon to Newcastle? I know we are paying for the potential, but 45 million seems steep. Yeah, I mean, it's a strange one because I think profile a player in terms of he's very hard working, and is he a little bit like for Almiron in terms of the defensive side of the game? Yes. My understanding was Newcastle had a no dickheads policy, and he seems like he's acted like one this week. It's not to say that he necessarily is one. Perhaps he's been very badly advised. Does he walk into the Newcastle team for 45 million? No. I think there's a homegrown element to it that might be important. A lot of Newcastle's backup players, if you look through their bench recently, you've got people like Lascelles, Jacob Murphy. There's other players who are English. John Shelby's been injured. At some point, these players are going to move on, and you might be a bit short on the homegrown quota. So you're buying a young English player who would have resale value. You know, if it doesn't work in a year, can you get half the money back? Yeah. I think Newcastle know they're short, and it's possible that Newcastle have identified that the player that they want to come in longer term as a right-sided forward, maybe they can't get to. And Gordon obviously can play left and right side forward positions. I have even seen him play a number 9 position for Everton. So, I mean, look, do I think Newcastle are right paying that money? Truthfully, no. But I don't think they've gone mad with the money. And for whatever reason, they've deemed him to be a player that they want and have identified. And they'll have their reasons for that. The honest answer is, Jahan, I'm just not sure at this moment. I know what those reasons are. He's a talented player. But we're also talking about a player that's really struggled to get in a terrible Everton team over the last few months. And maybe that's because he knew this sort of thing was going to come to a head this month. Perhaps he struggled mentally, for example. And I know there's a player in there. He was great actually in August when everyone thought he was probably going to go to Chelsea. He got his head down and played quite well. Then after the window shut, interestingly, his performances dipped. This time it's gone the other way. Do I think it's worth that money? Like, if Tottenham paid that money for him, I'd be asking serious questions, would be my take. Newcastle probably need to ask less so, though. Rhino says, afternoon, James, what's your best guess as to where Arsenal v Everton will go? Feels like the best alternative to Willie Nonto triple captain. Okay, that Willie bit was a joke. Ha 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 ha. Hello, my friend. I hope you're well. What Rhinos is referring to there is the Arsenal-Everton game that was postponed from, I'm going to guess, game week 7. Yeah, yes, it would have been game week 7. I did think for a while that it would go into game week 24. I now don't. I think the most likely week, in all honesty, is game week 29, mate, which I know is a really, really boring answer, but I do think that's the most likely. Also consider that should Arsenal lose tonight, then they're only going to have one double game week. Most likely. Palace are already out the cup. I'm just looking ahead, just checking who they're playing. 32. Southampton already out the cup. So yeah. So if Arsenal lose tonight, unless there's something that we can't predict, whether COVID, whatever, they're only going to have one double. And Everton would be the second fixture of that. And then I think in that case it's 29 or 34, and that probably comes down to what's the best week for Sky to pick up the game and show it, because I imagine because of Everton's position they'll want to do so. So it might have to fit around other TV selection in terms of what week it goes into. It's also the case that obviously Manchester City will be in a position where they're a game behind potentially if they progress to, say, the cup quarterfinals. So it might be a case for holding it back later. But if you ask me to, right, James, throw a dart, what week? Right now, I'd say game week 29 is the most likely. Ethan says 2 questions, if that's okay. Which combo do you think is better for the game week 23 doubles? And Nketiah and Mahrez or Odegaard and Stones? Already have 2 other Arsenal and City. I mean, what you have to consider with Nketiah and Mahrez is potentially neither of them are longer term, because obviously you've got Jesus to come back, not for a while, admittedly. And obviously, look, any Manchester City players susceptible to suddenly lose their place in the team. Although he's playing very well at the moment, Mahrez. So I'd consider that. Now, obviously, the same applies to John Stones, even though it looks quite secure at the moment. Martin Odegaard obviously doesn't apply to. He will play 90% of the games for Arsenal. So I think probably the Odegaard and Stones route, even though that's a bit boring with a centre-back, I think that's probably the one. And what you need to consider as well, Ethan, is obviously like you've got a forward and a midfielder in there versus a midfield and defender. So if you go and Nketiah and Mahrez, you've still got a problem defensively, I should say. Ethan goes on to say, and also I can do Kulusevski to Bruno Fernandes for free this week, but I have the exact money. Bruno looks like he'll go up again, probs this weekend. Is it stupid to make that move before he does? Look, in terms of if the double goes ahead, you will know for sure on Saturday night if it's going to go ahead for definite. All that needs is United not to draw and Leeds not to draw. If those 2 things both don't happen, then you know the 22 double's on. So from that perspective, you can buy him. You can buy him. There's obviously another game to navigate, but United are in a strong position against Nottingham Forest, where there's every chance Bruno may even get a rest. So from that perspective, in theory, if you know for certain in 22 it's going to happen, you could in theory make the move from Saturday night. But what I would warn is there's other things potentially to learn on Sunday. So for example, I mentioned about the possibility of a 26 double for Liverpool. It's nothing you're factually going to learn Brighton-Liverpool, but in terms of the result, that will give us a greater understanding. West Ham could potentially have a double game week in 25 if they lost to Derby. That's a possibility on Monday night. So ideally it's probably wait. But in theory, on Saturday night, you could know for sure that the double's going ahead, and that will be tempting. I certainly wouldn't make the move tonight. No chance. No chance I'd make the move tonight. So if the price is going up tonight, also, just to add on that as well, although someone's close to going up in price, I wouldn't be certain at the moment that they do. Most people should be very... And I know there have been some price changes, but we're towards the end of the first week of a 2-week gap. So you'd think those who had intentions of going early will have done so. So you should be safe. I can't say... I've not even looked at the price websites this week, but I really wouldn't make the move tonight. Tomorrow night, in theory, you could get away with it. Ali Bismo says, hi, James. The only way I get Bruno without hits is by either ditching Kane or hokey cokey with Kevin De Bruyne. Should I still go for him or just get Lisandro Martinez? And it allows me to get Saka also with 2 free transfers. Yeah, so what's wrong with going the extra? I'm going to guess maybe you have Shaw, Ali. What's wrong with going a double defensive? Okay, so you could look at it from this, but okay, you haven't got Bruno. He's going to be a problem for you this week. Yeah, but then you'd have double defensive and you'll be over everyone else. Working on the assumption most people will have Marcus Rashford. So you're not going to win anything if you don't get the second defensive player in, because a lot of people will have a defensive player. So I would consider that route, and that's the most likely for me. It's probably just not going to work for me to get Bruno Fernandes. I'm in a similar predicament to you, Ali, and I'm probably going to let that go, I think. Jonathan Aves says, which teams finished third and fourth this year? Have a great weekend, mate. You're very welcome. You too, Jonathan. Third, United, as in Manchester, and fourth, Newcastle would be how I'd foresee it at the moment. I think United are capable of finishing second, particularly if Arsenal increase their lead and if Man City get deeper in the Champions League. I wouldn't be surprised if City finish third. Wouldn't hugely shock me. Newcastle could also finish third, for example, but it'd certainly settle for fourth now. They're, I think, obviously at more risk than Manchester United, despite the goal difference advantage that Newcastle have. I think most of us would agree on that. So, but I still fancy them to do it. They've lost one game all season, right? They've been consistent when the inconsistencies of Chelsea, Liverpool and Tottenham have obviously all caused them problems. Craig Muir says, hi James, hope you're well. Couple issues approaching for potential blank game week 25. Considering benching Kane against City and taking a -4 for Patterson to Strauch for the double plus cover for blank, false. No, I wouldn't take a -4 for a Leeds defender. If it was free, I'd say, yeah, fine. -4 for a Leeds defender when the second fixture's Manchester United away. What are you overly expecting? Have you not got a single game week player that can potentially do better? In terms of benching Kane, wouldn't do that. That would just be my advice. I wouldn't do that. If Tottenham do have a good day, he'll have a good day. It's highly likely. So I wouldn't bench Harry Kane. Honestly. But 16 goals, then all against crap teams. So no, I would be playing Harry Kane. I would not take a -4 for a Leeds defender. In all honesty, I don't think I'd take a -4 for any Leeds player unless it was enabling something else, i.e. Mitrovic to Nonto also allows, I don't know, Pereira to Mahrez, Odegaard, whatever, then that's fine. But if it's just specifically for the Leeds player, second game's United away. And then they've got United afterwards as well. You can say, yeah, cover 25, but you can wait, I think. Steve says, good afternoon, James. Hope you're well. Forest are looking at signing Navas. Yeah, I've heard this. Keylor Navas. How are they managing to stay within FFP? I'm getting a bit concerned now as a Forest fan. Take care, pal. I wouldn't overly. We did a podcast on a Patreon, not this week, last week, on Chelsea spending on our Money in Football show. And essentially, there's a lot of people asking similar about Chelsea at the moment. And UEFA are obviously trying to bring this rule in that means amortisation, basically the spread of the cost of the transfer fee and wages, can be restricted to a maximum of 5 years rather than these long contracts that Chelsea have been giving out. So I don't know the situation enough about contracts with Nottingham Forest players and what they've obviously offered. I can't say I've looked deeply into the wages. We do know they've bought a lot of players. It's worth remembering that they came up with a squad that was essentially probably 11, 12, 13 players. They had a lot of players obviously on loan last year, as you'll know, etc. So the investment in terms of bodies had to be there in a very, very big way. And there were obviously other players that Cooper deemed surplus to requirements that he didn't want, like Joe Lolly, for example. You've got players who've come in there like Jesse Lingard, who we know is a 1-year contract. So if Forest get relegated, it's no problem. He's gone. That's them wages straight off the books. I imagine some of the overseas players that have joined, the likes of Gustavo Scarpa, for example, probably have relegation release clauses. I'm sure Forest have got it in their in a lot of these players' clauses. You would like to think that there's serious reduction in wages for those that do stay if they go down. That's probably come with a hike for a lot of players in terms of increased salaries for players that came up with them, who got promoted with them, players like Worrell and McKenna, for example, who've probably been dealt with decent bonuses. So I wouldn't stress. I mean, look at it this way, right? Nottingham Forest trying to establish themselves as a Premier League club, and spending is one way of doing it. Now, of course, the concern for you would be, if you go back down, what's going to happen? I suspect that Forest will make a lot of money on incomings if they get relegated from these players. These players like Scarpa and Danilo have been getting a lot of interest from a lot of other clubs. Someone like Morgan Gibbs-White, a lot of people question the money you paid for him. You get your money back and more. So I don't think it's a huge issue for Nottingham Forest at the moment. If they went down, didn't sell the players, then it becomes a problem quite quickly. But I don't think that'll be the case. What I would say is that I'd be a bit concerned that is it a bit too trigger happy rather than the financials. Like I mentioned, I mean, Chris Wood is, I was going to say it's English, it's not, is he? It's obviously New Zealand. But he's a player we're obviously familiar with in terms of knows the Premier League and knows English football very well. My concern is that I didn't think he was a player that fit the profile of what Nottingham Forest were looking for. You've just got to a position where the midfield three of Yates, Mangala and Freuler seems to have finally become solidified, and you're looking to add Danilo to it. Now that might be because they've decided, well, it needs competition because that three are much better than the others, but you've already invested in other competition, people like Cheku Kiyate, I know has been unavailable and stuff. So it does feel a little bit scattergun at times. If you're concerned from the financial perspective, if you stay up, it's no concern. If you go down, I don't think it'll be as big an issue as most people think. That would be my take. Sam Routledge says, with only a few days left of the transfer window, which players' positions would you make a priority if you were Spurs' director of football, realistically speaking? I hope you have a great weekend, mate. Spoken about this before, Sam, because it's potentially at odds with the future. The manager wouldn't be spending a lot of money at the moment. So if you can get players for the positions that we need, right wing back, centre back, central midfield, now that Dan Juma's in, then yeah, go and do it. They're not going to buy a goalkeeper in this window. So we roll with Hugo and it'll be what it'll be till the end of the season. That's fine. I'm not as up in arms about that as a lot of other people are. So, but centre-back would be the real priority for me. I think it's very difficult to find the right creative midfielder in a January transfer window. To be honest, it's going to be a quality. And again, I think Tottenham should look at short-term options at the moment because I don't see the point of giving someone a 5-year contract to suit a certain system when the manager could well be gone quite quickly. In the summer, obviously. Or soon if results get bad. Keith Rowley says, greeting James, no question, just wanted to say hi and keep up the fantastic work. Best channel out there. Very much appreciated, guys. I should say Keith, really. If the rest of you guys could hit the fun button, hit the like, hit the subscribe, it's very much appreciated. Josh Telling says, hey James, non-FPL question. What do you think of the Dyche appointment for Everton? I guess it's short-term plan to keep them up, not long-term planning. Disagree with that a little bit. I think it can be long-term planning. How long did Sean Dyche manage Burnley for? 7, 8 years? I can't remember. And you go, don't compare Burnley-Everton. Right, shouldn't compare Burnley-Everton. But actually at the moment we have to. Because Everton's quality of football player is not good enough. I did a very brief place for our patrons earlier in the week on who I thought Everton should appoint. For me, it was unanimous that it should be Sean Dyche. And I get that some Evertonians might think, well, it's not the style of football, it's not forward thinking. I've spoken about this so many times over the last year or so. Everton are in for pain. Not just this season, there's going to be more pain next year, whatever division they're in, etc. It's going to take a while. I said last January, Everton are in for 5 years of pain. And we're now coming into year 2 of that 5-year period. So Everton needs someone who can get the best out of the parts he's got, who's working under restrictions. Those restrictions are because of ineptitude recently over the last few years in the transfer market. Everton can't really fix the problem now properly. It's patchwork. And Sean Dyche, we've seen it, can get the best out of what he's got. Now, it might be that Everton still go down. It might be that Everton go down and they sack Dyche when they're 15th in the Championship in December. Right, that's possible. It's not me saying Sean Dyche is going to fix the problem. But what I would say is, I think if Sean Dyche wasn't coming in, that's what I think could happen to Everton anyway. Generally, if they go down, I would be surprised if they came immediately back up, honestly. Admittedly, I should say I said similar about Burnley this time last year as well, and they're doing very well, but they've completely overhauled their style and stuff and have reinvested, and we didn't think they would. Everton just won't be able to, I don't think. They'll have to scrape together every little bit of money they can from what they've got, and it's not huge interest in too many of their players. So I think Dyche in the immediate gives them the very best opportunity of staying up. Because I think if they'd appointed almost any other manager, I'd have thought they'd definitely go. And I still think Everton will go down, to be totally honest. But I think Sean Dyche gives them the very best opportunity in the immediate of stabilising that football club. Very good manager. Players play for him. We know it. He's a good character. I think he can handle the pressure of what Everton fans will demand in terms of the work ethic of their players. The Everton fans aren't stupid. They know that they're short of quality. So I think Sean Dyche in the short term is the right answer. Now, if Sean Dyche helps Everton stay up, and even in 12 months we sit here and Everton are 14th and looking a bit more comfortable, for example, and the financial problems are easing a little bit, then there's no reason why Sean Dyche won't take Everton into that new stadium and stay there for a few years. Think back a couple of years, a lot of us were saying Sean Dyche deserves a chance at a big club. Everton always felt like the one that would be the right fit. So I really think that he could be there for quite a while if it works out. And Everton also haven't had that. They've jumped from manager to manager and different style, etc. And I realised that Everton going to qualify for the Champions League in 3 years playing scintillating football under Sean Dyche. No. Right now there's far bigger things at play for Everton than what they think they should be as a football club. And they've got to go through all these years of pain first. And I think Sean Dyche gives them the very best opportunity of getting through this period. That would be my take. Ballroom Jam says, good evening all. Jim Pro 100, Sky thoughts on Almiron to Arsenal asset on Saturday. What? This weekend there's no Sky Fantasy football, mate. There's no Premier League football this week. And I'm trying to think the following week. Obviously both play on the Saturday. You could do. I don't think it's the best example, but I did speak about a few on Wednesday's podcast about moving on, perhaps say like a Chelsea player to an Arsenal player or a Fulham player after they play each other on a Friday night and then making that move on a Saturday. I don't know. Newcastle got West Ham at home. I certainly wouldn't give it any thought to the transfer window shut. Gordon obviously could impact Almiron's expected minutes. So, look, if you're definitely sure you want to get rid of Almiron, I think, look, you're upgrading the player. It's not a move I particularly like doing in Sky, going on the same day. I think it's understandable, and you won't have any rotational concerns for probably at least 7 or 8 of the Arsenal players at Everton. I don't mind it, in short. Who's next? James Lovegrove says, afternoon all. Hello, James. I was telling a story about you to our patrons on a Zoom call earlier today about me and you in McDonald's in Holborn, drunk. Well, at least I was anyway. FPL PTSD, hello Ian, says, afternoon all. No question really, just another thanks to James and Suj and maybe Nico for all the quality content month in, month out. Much appreciated, mate. Obviously, if you want to be like Ian and show that appreciation properly, and Ian does, you can support us www.patreon.com/Planet FPL. JP says, bench Kane for Mitoma this week. I'm not having it, honestly. I wouldn't bench Harry Kane any game. Penalty taker for start, right? City could beat Tottenham 6-2. He could score 2 penalties. No, not for me. Perlo's Pen says, hi, James. If you had to compete in the Olympics, what would your event be? Can I go back and be 15 or 16 again and say, like, 1,500 metres or something like that? God, now... I'd need a bus to complete that, I think. Or a wheelchair. One or the other. If the bus can't do the course. Olympic sport now. Table tennis, maybe? Maybe table tennis is a possibility. I mean, does football count as an Olympic sport? I don't suppose I'm good enough to play, to be totally honest. God. Yeah, I'm going to say that, though, I think. Table tennis. Why not? JP says, how does Danjuma get into the Spurs lineup? In for Son? Why does it have to be getting the Spurs lineup? Didn't we have all these conversations about Richarlison last summer? About, look, Tottenham need depth. Clearly, Lucas Moura is done for, unfortunately. Looks like he can't get rid of this injury problem. Brian Hill... I know he's covered not too badly, but he's such a huge drop-off from Kulusevski. And that Son's underperformed, right? So Danjuma's another challenge. I think he can also play in central positions. Maybe opens up the possibility somewhere down the line of maybe playing with the 4 attacking players. It may be Antonio Conte didn't want him at all, and the club wants to get him familiar, and then they buy him properly when they've got a different manager in the summer. I have no idea. What I do know is that Tottenham absolutely needed attacking reinforcement behind the 4 attacking players, because we haven't been able to use our bench offensively. It feels like going back to like Son's hat-trick against Leicester. Feels like the last time we were able to bring a player on. Kulusevski, a couple of games like Liverpool at home, when he'd literally just come back from injury. That's why he was up, because he'd just come back from injury. So we had to get some depth in there. Depth is good for competition. Remember, we've got Champions League restarting soon. Hopefully, touch wood, we'll progress in the FA Cup. I'm not going up to Preston tomorrow to get beat, right? It's important to us. So we probably will, don't get me wrong. But yeah, we need depth. Absolutely had to get another attacking player in. He doesn't. The thing is with Tottenham, right? Look at this, and you look at that front three. As shit as we've been for a lot of this season, how do you improve on Son? And I know Son's been bad, but generally, how do you improve on Son, Kane, Kulusevski in a January window? Tough, right? So you're getting competition in. Talking of Tottenham, Ricky Saunders, my Tottenham correspondent, is in this afternoon, fella. Ricky, you have a message from last night you need to respond to from me. Thank you, mate. Have a good one. John Manfield says, good day to you too, John. You don't need to respond to it now, by the way, Ricky. Jerry says, good afternoon, James. Who would you start between Gabriel and Botman for 22? Arsenal tend to keep cleans on the road. However, Newcastle defence has been unbreakable. Love your content and good luck. I've got to go with the Newcastle, I think, at the moment. Yeah, I think that probably Arsenal are more likely to win 3-1 than Newcastle, just generally speaking. That said, West Ham are better offensively than Everton, but it might be a different Everton with a new manager. The crowd will be up, right? There's at least something for the crowd to get behind, I think, even for those who perhaps maybe didn't want Sean Dyche. They'll give him a reception. They'll try and get behind their team. And I think probably some of the Yanks you've seen, you won't see as much, because Evertonians will realise you're playing the best team in the league at the moment. The crowd will need to be on side. So, to be honest, Botman, it's the only way to get any gain out of Trippier at the moment as well, anyway, is double Newcastle. So, I think, look, with a home fixture, yeah, the Newcastle, I think. Anthony Mazzano says, James, do you think the overspending for Chelsea has finally caught up on them? That's why they're ranked 10 in the Premier League right now. No. Changed manager. They've had a huge number of injuries. I've said several times on this show, we can't really judge Graham Potter yet, because he's never been able to get anywhere near his best team. Ben Chilwell and Reece James back fit. They might go on a little run here now. So Chelsea's overspending is not why they're 10th in the league. Alistair Coper says, hey mate, how would you rank Nketiah, Saka, Odegaard for 23? Take price into account at least slightly. I've got Martial as my third United at the moment. Do I use 2 free transfers to change him to Bruno, even if fit? Cheers. Could do, and then chain it on. I don't hate that. I mean, there's every chance Weghorst stays in the team anyway. I didn't watch the game on Wednesday night, but by all accounts, he played well again. I know he had 100% pass succession. It's only 20 passes, but that's kind of a normal number for a number 9 like him, actually. So that shows his link-up play must have been pretty good generally. In terms of ranking them, probably Odegaard, Saka and Nketiah for me. Probably that order. And that's not to say Odegaard's necessarily better than Saka. It's factoring in what you said, Alistair, the prices. John Manfield says, James, thoughts on Anthony Gordon just been confirmed? Has it? Threat to Gordon. I don't think it's been confirmed. I think an agreement of the fee has been confirmed. Threat to Almiron for the fee. This seems like a confusing transfer, but Newcastle transfers have been good recently. And yes, it is worth saying, Newcastle's transfer business over the last 12 months, they've bought well, largely. But I've covered it. So I'm just going to skip it because I did quite a bit on Gordon earlier, but thank you for the question, Andrew. Hello, Stian. I hope everything's well, my friend. Andrew King says, all right, pal. If you were 1.2 million overall, which ain't far away from, mate, a little bit above it, but not by much, and your team isn't set up for the coming doubles, would you consider wildcarding to get upside attacking players and remove defenders of upcoming doubles? Nope. Just wouldn't. I just wouldn't. I would have to absolutely hate my team. Alright, it's early on, right? You say change it now. What about later? Okay, yeah, there's the upside potentially, But what about you wild card into shit and then the game changes again and Liverpool get a double in 26 and the teams you thought would win in the FA Cup 5th round didn't and stuff. We can project that for 28. Doesn't mean we'll be right. Last year, as an example, right? Tottenham lost to Middlesbrough in round 5. Middlesbrough also beat Man United, I want to say, in round 4. So we can project these things. Doesn't mean that they'll be correct and happen. I just think this is generally kind of a bad period where it's probably just get in, keep fighting with the doubles, get yourself covered with your main players and that. Like, don't worry about Leeds. You ain't got any Leeds. Don't worry about Leeds. I'm going to presume you've got some Arsenal. You probably got some City. Okay, move on with it. You might be a little bit behind, but I think if you wildcard, you're not still having... You probably got some United. You wildcard, okay, you got 3. We can do wildcard and have 3 United, 3 City, 3 Arsenal. Sure. But is that truly what you want going forward? It's not a wildcard period for me, honestly. If you're in a broken position, you've got loads of injuries, you've got 4 or 5 unavailable players, you've got 4 or 5 other players you can't stand the sight of, fine, do it. There's many ways to play the game, and there's ever play it your way. But I can only answer that honestly, Andrew, and say we are coming into a period where the more engaged player has got more advantages because they will have more information. I can already see the tweets now saying, oh my God, I can't believe how many people free hitted in game week 25. That's going to be because people are going to get to game week 25 and they're going to see they've got 2 Newcastle players, 3 Man United players, a couple of Brighton players, whatever, and go, oh my God, I need to free hit. No one really should be free hitting in game week 25. The advantages are coming. Andrew, if you've got a specific target where you've got to finish top 100k, for example, for something specific, then you want to swing at it completely different, by all means go for it. But my honest opinion would be no. Seal says, hi James, love your Ask James streams. My question is, what is the weakest winning Premier League team you watched and how do you think they won the league? I really don't want to say Leicester, but that would be the modern one. But I mean, how did they win it? By they won it by completing the most miraculous football story ever in this country. So I'm not going to say them. The weakest team I've seen win the Premier League, I'm going to say, was it probably is the Blackburn team. It's either the Blackburn team or I think maybe United's 96-97 team. I think I want to say that's the lowest for points, maybe 96-97. They win it like 75 points or something and won it easy, I think. And that team was coming to an end, wasn't it? Cantona was about to retire. It got usurped by Arsenal in the run-in the following season. So I'd say, well, in Blackburn, how did they do it? Well, they did it because they spent more money than anybody else at that time. It's a reality. United, how did they still do it? There was basically no good competitor. Newcastle fell off from the previous season. Liverpool didn't live up to expectations. It was Arsene Wenger's first full season at Arsenal. Chelsea was not a thing then. Neither was Tottenham. Neither was Man City. They won it because there was no great competitor. So do you know what? I'm going to say that because Blackburn got taken all the way by United in 94-95. So I'm going to say the United 96-97 team. Addy Tour says, will tonight's game have any effect on the title race? Could do. I mean, I don't think Arsenal, as most fans I've seen saying today, probably aren't that bothered if they get beat. But it's potential big psychological one on winning. It's just the psyche of, won again, change some players, fine. The honest answer is though, Addy, there's no way of ever measuring that. We could look at Arsenal could beat City tonight and they could beat them again in a couple of weeks. Do Arsenal beat them in a couple of weeks because of anything that happens tonight? Maybe, but how do we ever measure that? So I don't know how we can say, mate. The answer is probably no. Liam H says, do you think Vardy will retire at Leicester or go somewhere else for one last hurrah? Wasn't that long ago Arsenal were after him? I mean, he's not going to go to Arsenal. Yeah, I'd probably stay at Leicester. I think Leicester aren't going to cut him off, are they? Didn't he sign a new contract fairly recently for another year or something, I think? So Leicester aren't gonna cut him off, sorry. I would imagine he'll go and play out in America. He's had an investment in a club out there, hasn't he? I not in the MLS, but at lower level. So I imagine he's every chance he'll want to go and get involved with them. I forget the name of the club. It's gone straight over my head. Perlo's Pen says, I think they're based near New York, but I can't remember the name of the team. The chances are most of you, with respect, probably won't have heard of them. Perlo's Pen says, I've seen a lot of saying Sonny is a dirty player recently. What are your opinions on this? Nah, I mean, he's had moments of it where he's been stupid. I think like he easily could have been sent off at Fulham on Monday, and to be honest, I wouldn't have been sitting here complaining if he was. I think there was one of them that he didn't mean on Monday. There were times when he has had some things. I think he's obviously got a bit of a reputation with obviously what happened with the terrible incident with Gomez at Everton, which he did mean to foul him, but obviously didn't mean to do that to him. And that's obviously stuck with him a little bit. He's had a little moments where he's lashed out stupidly and stuff. I think he's a player that can get quite agitated if it's not going his way. Would I say dirty? No, truthfully. But then I'm going to be a little bit protective of my player there. I mean, if I compare him, say, Romero, say, yeah, Romero's a dirty bastard, to be honest. I wouldn't put Sonny in that line. As Seal says, give us 3 active managers you would like to see managing the Premier League. 3 active managers now I'd like to see managing the Premier League. Xavi. I've not seen them, so I'd like to see it. But he's supposed to be doing very well at Barcelona. I didn't realise he'd only conceded 6 league goals. That's incredible. I'd love to see how Luis Enrique, might be quite similar style-wise. I'd love to see how Luis Enrique would get on here. And I'd tell you what, I'd love to see Roberto Mancini have another shot, actually. At managing, to be honest, something like a Tottenham, and see what he could do with it. Because I actually think it's what he's achieved with Italy, and it sounds remarkable because they've had obviously World Cup qualification failures, but what he achieved with Italy winning the Euros, not only did they win it, they were the best team in it, quite clearly. I'd be interested to see how that worked if he came back over here. So there's 3 names for you. I'll throw Nagelsmann in as well. Hansi Flick, there's a number of names you could name, right? Quite a few of them obviously in jobs where that's not going to happen. PFF says, opinions about Gordon to Newcastle. I've done that, but thanks for the question. Balkan Mag has the same question, but thank you. Bloomer says, are you angry on me? No, mate. Don't get angry with anyone, mate. My missus fucks me off sometimes, but I don't say it out loud. I'll just tell you guys. She won't listen to this. Jay says, hi, James. Is it a good time to start building a bench boost squad? I want to bench boost before I wildcard this season, but is it too early as I'm looking at leaving good players on the bench? Jay, what are you building towards, mate, with all due respect? Here's what I can tell you, right? It's not impossible that game week 29, we spoke about this the other week on the Chip Strategy podcast, it's not impossible that most of us may land in a position for game week 29, if it's a big double, where we may not even need to wildcard to use the bench boost. It could be that it's the biggest double, and it might be that the obvious answer, right now, none of us want a free hit, really, right? We're looking at it going, Chelsea playing Everton, great. Newcastle playing Forest, great. Arsenal could play Palace, for example, and the other fixtures could Villa against Bournemouth, okay? But it could be that 29 looks so good and we're all set for bench boost that we just go, well, I would just be better off free hitting here 28 to just cover that, get me 3 Chelsea players, etc., get me 3 Villa, and just use that, and then I've got this team ready for the bench boost 29. That's not impossible. Otherwise, Jay, right now, I don't know what you want me to tell you when I don't know what week you'd be aiming for. And I'm sorry, I would always aim to bench boost in a double game week. People can say it's overrated, etc. You are maximising your potential. It's the what it could be. I've had people in here going, James, you should have bench boosted in some single game week where a couple of randoms got me to 20 points. Yeah, great. I haven't had a single game week yet this season where I've scored more on the bench than I scored when I bench boosted last season. After time, it does work out shit, but it's about maximising the best of your possibilities, and having potentially 30 players playing a game week gives you the very, very best chance of doing that. So for me, from a bench boost perspective, it's going to be almost definitely game week 29 or game week 34, and quite how you build for that now, I don't know. I can give you a better indication come Thursday's podcast, though. FPL Harry, hello, my friend, says, love you, James. Have a cracking weekend. You too, mate. Good luck in the FA Cup this weekend. Oh, sorry, mate. Birth Media says, James, how do I get into the top 25k? Just give me 3 tips. Currently 120k. First tip is ask someone else. Secondly, ask someone who gives a shit. In all honesty, consistency. Consistency. When do you want to get in the top 25k by? Game week 38 or game week 25? If it's game week 38, you've just gone past the halfway stage. You're in a really, really nice position, and you're going to have more information than other people in the top 100k in forthcoming game weeks. Okay? That's the honest answer. But it's patience. Keep doing what's working. Don't overly indulge in terms of differential. If that's your target, keep chipping away. Think about it like this, right? You're 95k off. Let's call it 100. Let's call it 100k. Call it a round figure. You're 100k off, and there are 17 game weeks to go. So by my maths, if you can make up roughly 6k a week on average, chip away at it, mate. Ben Keane says, hi James, what do you think Everton's chances are staying up with Dyche? Much better than they were yesterday. Much better. I obviously spoke about Sean Dyche quite a bit earlier in the stream, so don't want to repeat that. But yeah, much better than this time yesterday. But thank you for the question, Ben. Luke Stevenson says, I hear some content creators saying that Martinelli to Odegaard isn't worth the transfer because transfers will be needed for doubles blanks. But if not now, then when? Could be missing points. The reason I wouldn't be overly keen on that transfer this coming week is, despite saying Everton have got an uplift, if they don't fix the right back problem or come to a different solution for the time they play Arsenal, you potentially got Gabriel Martinelli going up against Seamus Coleman. And I don't need to add to that. And Seamus Coleman has been an unbelievable player for Everton. But I think you know what I'm saying. Alistair Hargreaves says, out of all the FA Cup fixtures, which game is most likely to cause a shock? Preston against Tottenham, mate. Genuinely, that would be right up there, I guess. It would have to be. I mean, would we consider Brighton beating Liverpool a shock? I don't think we do we? Couldn't call that a shock. Shock's got to be lower league team beating a higher division. I think from that perspective, you'd have to say that there's every reason to say Tottenham might be the name this weekend that's most at risk. And I'm aware of that, right? As I said earlier in the stream, my team went out to Middlesbrough last year. So I'm aware that there's a danger. Sheffield Wednesday beat Newcastle in the same time slot in the third round. We've got 5,500 going up there tomorrow. We'll be very, very noisy. But their lot might be as well. I don't know. I haven't been to Deepdale before. So there's a challenge. It sounds like Harry Kane might not play tomorrow. He was actually unwell the other night, and he's been unwell most of the week. So, yeah, it's probably us. Probably most at threat. Sneaky Sunderland might do something at Fulham, to throw you another one. OP says, has Doherty lost his place now? Well, I'll give you a better answer on that after tomorrow and after Manchester City in the league. Obviously, if Porro comes in, it's looking even more difficult. My honest advice would be probably sell. It's probably... And by the way, if you bought him, he was probably the one to gamble on, particularly after the haul at Palace. I thought he'd stay in the team. I think the reality is Emerson's played the last two and actually he's done quite well. He was one of Tottenham's better performers at Fulham on Monday night, so I think he stays in. There's also been rumours, however, that Doherty had been unwell for most of last week. So any doubt, don't do anything. Sam Ratlish says, those asking about Gordon, he's versatile, so could be a threat to Almiron. I think he's more likely to play on the left. Just don't think Hal trusts St. Maximin yet. Preferably Joel Willock Central. Yeah, it's certainly a possibility that Gordon could play on the left of Almiron on the right. I'd just be concerned about how many goals between those two wide forwards. And obviously I know Almiron's done really well this year, but it looks like it might be returning to something more akin to what we're used to, though he has improved as a footballer massively. John Manford says, if Saints and Everton go down, who would you take for Spurs and who would excuse me, who would get a good move for the rest of the teams? Who would I take from Southampton or Everton? I think Tottenham will end up buying Jordan Pickford next summer. I would much rather Tottenham put more effort into going and getting David Raya from Brentford personally, but again, the homegrown factor might play a part there, and Everton's relegation. Tottenham might think they can do a deal better than the valuation, but I'd like to see Tottenham all over the idea of getting David Raya personally. So I think Jordan Pickford will be a Tottenham player next season. That's my opinion. Southampton. The first player I'd want to take from Southampton is a player we haven't seen all season. That's Tino Livramento, because of the prospect of what I think he can be. We think he may have had an injury setback. It's not been confirmed as yet. It might be we don't see him all season. That's honestly the first place I'd be looking at Southampton. Some good young players there. Actually, I lie. He wouldn't be the first because I'd take Romeo Lavia before I took him. I think it's an outstanding talent. It's been clear all season long when he's played for Southampton and when he hasn't. He started great. He got injured. They nosedived. He's come back. The results have slowly looked a little bit better. And he's not 100% fit yet. They keep taking him off early. But yeah, actually, Lavia would be the first. Take the other kids as well, the likes of Edozie and stuff. Yeah, bring them. From Everton, other than Pickford. Jeez. Tough. Arguably Cody. Honestly, homegrown, great leadership qualities. Not to play regularly, but actually just a part of the group because he's an incredible leader. Right, I'm going to cover a couple more of these. Arlene says, would you rather Spurs win the FA Cup or get top 4? I will answer that quite simply with the normal battle way answer that I normally give, is that it is more important for the football club to finish in the Champions League places. But reality is we fight to get in a competition we're very unlikely to win, and that becomes like a life circle. I would rather win the trophy this season, particularly when I know the manager's probably going to change as well. So if he comes in, if he's won the trophy, okay, it works, fine, everyone departs and we move on to different things. Great. And then if we don't, the reality is if the squad stays together, which it might, even if it doesn't finish top 4, I say the squad, the good players in the squad and additions come in, then we might even be in a better position to finish top 4 next year with no Champions League, right? It's a possibility. I think that's certainly benefited Arsenal. It's not to discredit anything they've done. They've been amazing, but certainly what Arsenal had in the Europa League certainly helped them in terms of competitive games versus some other teams, for example. Yeah, I'd take the trophy, mate. Neil Kager says, hey, you 100 not hitting the like. Why not? Neil Kager wants about 100 of you to hit the like before you leave. I'm going to do this last one from Pobal Scully. Says, Mitrovic to Nketiah, KDB to Bruno. Thoughts? Have White and Martinelli already. Would you change either of them instead of above? I would want to be able to go back to KDB. That's the only thing maybe with that. You should be fine. I presume the money's still there. Is that what you want to do? You've got 2 free transfers and that's the one you want to do for the following week is get KDB back. Then I think, yes, for what's immediately in front of you, it's perfectly reasonable. Thanks very much for everybody who's contributed in the questions. Sorry to those that I didn't get to. What we're doing next week. There will be a Manchester United versus Leeds clash of the correspondence with Gary Robinson and Andy Martin if the double goes ahead. That podcast won't happen. If it doesn't, we'd probably rather savour it for another rainy day. So that'll be Monday or Tuesday. People's Poll on the other. Wednesday, Sky Fantasy. As I said, Thursday's podcast will be the Chip Strategy podcast once we've got all the information. And then obviously it's a deadline next Friday as well. So I may do a very, very early Ask James stream possibly next Friday where people can obviously ask follow-up questions from all the Chip Strategy stuff from the day before as well. But thanks very much to everybody who's contributed in the chat. Have a great weekend, everyone. And for the benefit of those on the audio, cue music, please, Manchild.